Northern Italy, September 1943. The persistent, low thrum of distant artillery had become a familiar companion to the American tankers of the 1st Armored Division, a sound that usually signified the predictable grind of the front. But on this particular morning, just after 0400 hours, a different kind of unease settled over their bivouac near Salerno. A disquiet born not of sound, but of rumor. Whispers had begun to circulate among the infantry. Stories of a new German tank, a monstrous machine that shrugged off their anti-tank rounds and vaporized Shermans with contemptuous ease. Tales so outlandish they were initially dismissed as battlefield hysteria, yet the stakes for dismissing them were becoming lethally clear. Sergeant Frank Duke Ellington, a veteran M4A1 Sherman commander with 3 confirmed Panzer IV kills under his belt, had heard the latest iteration from a jittery rifleman during a resupply run. The soldier, still visibly shaken, described a steel behemoth, its gun a gaping maw, its armor impervious. Duke, leaning against the warm flank of his own Sherman, Hellcat, had offered a dismissive chuckle, attributing the description to the fog of war and the infantryman's understandable fear of any German armor. He had seen enough German tanks to know their limitations, and the M4, with its 75mm gun, had proven itself capable against anything the Wehrmacht had deployed thus far. The prevailing intelligence reports from G2 had consistently downplayed the existence of any significantly superior German heavy tank in the Italian theater, suggesting that the bulk of German armored strength remained concentrated on the Eastern Front. Production logs, captured from various German depots, indicated a continued reliance on the Panzer III and Panzer IV chassis, with only limited numbers of the heavier Panther tank being observed in other sectors. The official line was that any new, more formidable German armor was either a prototype or deployed elsewhere, certainly not in sufficient numbers to pose a widespread threat to the Allied advance. Yet, the anecdotes persisted, growing more detailed with each retelling, moving beyond the simple fear of a big gun to specific accounts of engagement. Reports from British units operating further north spoke of encounters with a vehicle so heavily armored that even their 6-pounder anti-tank guns, effective against most German tanks, failed to penetrate its frontal glacis. These were not the usual exaggerations of weary soldiers. They carried a chilling consistency, hinting at a design philosophy fundamentally different from the familiar German armored doctrine. The Sherman, with its combination of mobility, a potent 75mm main gun, and adequate armor for its class, had become the workhorse of the Allied advance. Its design prioritized a balance of firepower, protection, and speed, allowing for rapid exploitation of breakthroughs and effective infantry support. Against the Panzer IV Aus G, with its longer 7.5cm KWK-40 L48 gun, the Sherman's 75mm M3 gun, while possessing a slightly lower muzzle velocity, could still achieve penetration at combat ranges, particularly against the Panzer IV's side and rear armor, and even its frontal plate under optimal conditions. This perceived parity, however, rested on the assumption of known adversaries. The emerging accounts described a tank that seemed to defy these established combat parameters, a machine whose very presence shifted the tactical landscape. The whispers suggested a new kind of threat, one that rendered the well-practiced tactics of Sherman crews suddenly dangerously obsolete. Occupied France, August 1944. The American tankers of the 2nd Armored Division had pushed hard. The hedgerows of Normandy, a relentless claustrophobic maze. Their M4 Shermans, reliable workhorses of the Allied advance, had proven capable against the bulk of German armor encountered thus far. Mostly Panzer IVs and Stug assault guns, their 7.5cm guns a familiar threat. But whispers had begun to circulate. Stories of a new, heavier German tank, a beast with armor impervious to their 75mm main gun. A tank so formidable it seemed more myth than machine. These were dismissed by most as battlefield exaggeration, a natural byproduct of combat fatigue and heightened tension. The 3rd Battalion, 67th Armored Regiment, specifically, had not yet encountered anything that truly challenged their Sherman's capabilities. Their confidence, born of repeated successes and the sheer weight of Allied materiel, was high. They believed in their numerical superiority, in the tactical flexibility of their medium tanks, and in the overwhelming air support that often cleared the path ahead. The idea of an invulnerable enemy tank was an uncomfortable anomaly, an outlier that did not fit the established pattern of their war. On August 7th, near the village of Saint-Aignan-de-Cramsnil, this perception was shattered. A column of Shermans, part of a larger advance, moved cautiously along a sunken road. The morning mist still clung to the fields, reducing visibility to a few hundred yards. The lead Sherman, commanded by Lieutenant David Spear, rounded a slight bend, its coaxial 30 caliber machine gun scanning the dense foliage. The crew was alert, but not expecting the sudden, violent eruption that followed. From a concealed position in a small copse of trees, roughly 800 meters distant, a single, dark silhouette materialized. It was a Tiger I, its angular form unmistakable, even in the dim light. Before the Sherman crew could even register the threat, a flash of orange-white muzzle blast split the air. The 8.8 centimeter KWK 36 L56 main gun, a weapon of devastating power, fired its armor-piercing round. The shell struck Spear's Sherman squarely on the glacis plate, punching through the 63 millimeter of face-hardened armor as if it were cardboard. The impact was catastrophic. The round detonated inside the fighting compartment, igniting the stored ammunition and fuel. The Sherman erupted into a fireball, its turret blown clear of the hull by the force of the internal explosion. The crew, caught entirely by surprise, had no chance of escape. The lead tank, the spearhead of the advance, was instantly reduced to a burning wreck, a stark monument to the Tiger's lethal efficiency. The 2nd Sherman, following closely behind, attempted to reverse, its tracks churning the soft earth. Its commander, through the smoke and confusion, caught a glimpse of the Tiger's menacing silhouette. Before he could issue a coherent order, another 8.8 centimeter round slammed into the side of his tank, penetrating the thinner 38 millimeter side armor. This hit, too, resulted in a swift internal explosion, the Sherman's engine compartment erupting in flames, immobilizing it immediately. A 3rd Sherman, attempting to maneuver for a flanking shot, found itself exposed. Its 75 millimeter M3 gun, effective against most German armor, was utterly insufficient against the Tiger's frontal and side armor, which ranged from 80 mm to 100 mm. The Tiger, having calmly reloaded, traversed its turret with a steady hydraulic whine. Its 3rd shot, fired with chilling precision, struck the 3rd Sherman's turret, disabling the gun and killing the gunner instantly. The tank brewed up moments later, its ammunition rack cooking off in a series of secondary explosions. In less than 5 minutes, 3 American M4 Shermans, each a vital component of the Allied advance, had been utterly destroyed by a single German heavy tank. The engagement was a brutal, unambiguous demonstration of the Tiger I's combat superiority, a stark reevaluation of the battlefield calculus for the American forces. The myth, it seemed, was very real. The reports from Tunisia trickled back, then coalesced into a disturbing pattern. Allied intelligence analysts, sifting through after-action summaries and debriefing transcripts, began to notice recurring descriptions of a new German tank, one far exceeding the capabilities of anything previously encountered. The early accounts, often fragmented and colored by the shock of battle, spoke of a vehicle impervious to their standard anti-tank rounds, a phantom that could destroy multiple Shermans before itself being damaged. These initial dispatches were frequently dismissed as exaggerations, the product of combat fatigue and the fog of war, Yet the sheer volume of similar observations eventually demanded closer scrutiny. One particular damage report from a British 6-pounder anti-tank gun crew, dated February 27, 1943, detailed 7 direct hits on the front glasses of a large German tank, all at ranges under 500 yards. The rounds, 57mm armor-piercing shot, had simply shattered or ricocheted, leaving no discernible penetration. This contrasted starkly with the established performance envelopes of the 6-pounder, which was expected to penetrate 70 to 80 millimeters of vertical armor at that range. The German tank in question had then systematically destroyed 2 Churchill tanks and disabled a third before withdrawing, seemingly unscathed. Interrogation files from captured German Afrika Korps personnel, though often yielding little concrete technical data, occasionally contained boasting references to a new heavy tank or Tiger. One captured grenadier, under questioning, described seeing a Tiger tank withstand multiple hits from Allied guns, remarking, "It was like hitting a wall." These anecdotal accounts, when cross-referenced with the damage reports and the increasing number of Sherman losses attributed to an unknown, heavily armed adversary, painted a picture of a formidable new threat. The first tangible evidence arrived in the form of photographs, blurry aerial reconnaissance images that showed a large, boxy tank with a distinctive turret and a long, powerful gun. These photographs, taken in early March 1943, provided the first visual confirmation that the Germans had indeed deployed a new class of heavy armor. Subsequent ground reconnaissance, often at great risk, managed to capture clearer images, allowing for preliminary identification and estimation of its dimensions. Technical intelligence officers, working from these limited visual cues, began to hypothesize about the tank's specifications. The sheer size suggested substantial armor, likely exceeding 80 millimeters on the front, and the length of the gun barrel indicated a high-velocity weapon, almost certainly 88 millimeters. The implications were immediate and severe. The standard 75mm gun on the M4 Sherman, with its maximum penetration of around 90 millimeters at point-blank range against vertical armor, would be largely ineffective against such a heavily armored opponent at typical combat distances. The existing anti-tank doctrine and equipment were suddenly rendered inadequate. The operational summaries from the front lines increasingly featured the term Tiger, no longer a myth, but a terrifying reality. Each encounter seemed to confirm its invulnerability and destructive power. The consensus among intelligence analysts solidified. The Germans had introduced a weapon that fundamentally shifted the tactical balance of armored engagements, and the Allies were unprepared for its arrival. Normandy, late June 1944. The initial shock of the ambush had given way to a grim, methodical investigation. American ordnance specialists, accompanied by combat engineers, meticulously examined the shattered remains of the 3 M4 Shermans. The first Sherman, its turret blown clean off, lay inverted in a shallow ditch, its hull a twisted mass of scorched steel. The second, still upright but missing its entire right track assembly, showed a gaping, ragged hole in its glacis plate. The third, further down the hedgerow, had been struck repeatedly, its engine compartment a charred ruin. The specialists, their faces grimed with dust and oil, noted the distinct entry and exit points on the armor. These were not the clean, circular punctures typically left by the German 7.5 centimeter KWK-40 L48 cannon found on the Panzer IV, nor the smaller, more numerous impacts from anti-tank rifles or towed guns. Instead, the holes were wide, almost perfectly circular, and often surrounded by spalling, fragments of steel ejected from the interior surface of the armor upon impact. The edges of these penetrations were remarkably clean, suggesting immense kinetic energy delivered by a projectile of significant mass and velocity. Forensic analysis of the shell fragments recovered from inside the Shermans and embedded in the surrounding earth provided the first concrete evidence. These fragments, often weighing several pounds, showed traces of tungsten carbide, a material known for its extreme hardness and density. The sheer size of the fragments, coupled with their composition, pointed definitively to a larger caliber weapon than any previously encountered on the Western Front. Ballistic calculations, performed using the observed damage patterns and known Sherman armor thickness, indicated an armor-piercing projectile traveling at a muzzle velocity exceeding 900 meters per second. The trajectory of the incoming fire was also telling. All three Shermans had been struck from the same general direction, a dense copse of trees approximately 800 meters distant. This range was well beyond the effective engagement distance of most German anti-tank weaponry of the period, which typically struggled for accuracy and penetration past 500 meters against the Sherman's frontal armor. The precision of the hits, even at that extended range, spoke to a weapon system with superior optics and a stable firing platform. Intelligence reports, previously dismissed as exaggerated or speculative, now gained chilling credibility. Descriptions of a new, heavy German tank armed with an 8.8 centimeter gun and possessing formidable armor had circulated for months. These reports, often originating from Eastern Front prisoner interrogations or reconnaissance flights, detailed a machine designated the Panzerkampfwagen VI or Tiger. Its 8.8 centimeter KWK-36 L56 main gun was a derivative of the formidable Flak 36 anti-aircraft cannon, renowned for its stopping power. Its frontal armor, a massive 100 millimeters thick, was believed to be impervious to the 75 millimeter M3 gun of the Sherman at combat ranges. The sheer scale of the Tiger's production, however, remained a point of contention. Early estimates suggested only a handful existed, deployed to elite units for specific operations. Production logs, later captured, would reveal that by mid-1944, fewer than 1,000 Tigers had been built, a stark contrast to the tens of thousands of Shermans already fielded by the Allied forces. This scarcity had contributed to the prevailing Allied belief that the Tiger was more a propaganda tool than a widespread threat. Yet the evidence before them, etched in the ruined hulls of three Shermans, demonstrated unequivocally that even a single Tiger could alter the tactical landscape with terrifying efficiency. The myth, it seemed, had become a brutal reality. Bovington Camp, Dorset, England, late 1943. The hulks arrived, scarred and silent, their steel skins bearing the unmistakable marks of combat. Allied technical intelligence teams, a mix of British and American engineers and armor specialists, meticulously examined the first captured Tiger I tanks, salvaged from the North African desert and later the battlefields of Sicily. These machines, once objects of dread, were now cold, inert specimens, yielding their secrets under the probing hands of experts. The initial shock of their battlefield performance gave way to a systematic dissection, aiming to quantify the threat and formulate a response. The armor plates were the first point of intense scrutiny. Damage reports confirmed the Tiger's formidable protection. Frontal glasses plate, a massive slab of rolled homogeneous armor, measured 100 millimeters thick, angled at 80 degrees from the vertical. The turret front, equally impressive, presented 100 millimeters of vertical armor, while the side hull and turret maintained a substantial 80 millimeters. These thicknesses dwarfed the protection offered by any Allied tank then in widespread service. For instance, the M4 Sherman's frontal glacis was 50.8 millimeters, angled at 56 degrees, and its turret front was 76.2 millimeters. The Tiger's sheer mass of steel, often of high quality, meant that standard Allied anti-tank rounds, particularly those fired from the 75 millimeter M3 gun on the Sherman, struggled to achieve penetration at combat ranges. The 8.8 centimeter QWK-36 L56 main gun, a weapon already legendary from its anti-aircraft and anti-tank roles, was the heart of the Tiger's offensive capability. Its long barrel and robust breech mechanism were designed for high muzzle velocity and exceptional accuracy. Testing revealed that the Panzerkampfwagen 39 armor-piercing capped ballistic capped APCBC round, weighing 10.2 kilograms, exited the barrel at approximately 773 meters per second. This projectile could reliably penetrate 100 millimeters of vertical armor at 1,000 meters, a range at which the Sherman's 75mm gun, firing its M61 APCBC round, could only penetrate 76 millimeters. The disparity in effective range and penetration capability was stark and deeply concerning. Optics and fire control systems further enhanced the Tiger's lethality. The primary gun sight, the Turmziel-Fernrohr 9B, was a monocular telescopic sight with 2.5x magnification, offering a wide field of view and precise aiming reticles. This was coupled with a robust turret traverse mechanism, both hydraulic and manual, allowing for rapid target acquisition and tracking. The commander's cupola, equipped with 5 vision blocks, provided excellent all-around situational awareness, a critical advantage in dynamic combat environments. These integrated systems allowed the Tiger to engage targets with devastating accuracy at ranges where Allied tanks were often unable to respond effectively. Production logs indicated that by late 1943, approximately 600 Tiger I tanks had been produced, with a monthly output fluctuating between 40 and 60 units. While never a mass-produced vehicle like the Sherman, which saw over 49,000 units built, the qualitative advantage of each Tiger unit was undeniable. Its deployment, often in small, concentrated numbers at critical points, could decisively influence local engagements, creating significant tactical imbalances. The material cost and manufacturing complexity of the Tiger, however, meant that such qualitative superiority came at the expense of quantity, a strategic trade-off that would ultimately weigh heavily on the German war effort. The ideological implications of the Tiger's design were also clear. It was a weapon built for dominance, a testament to a doctrine that prioritized individual powerful machines capable of overwhelming lesser opponents. This contrasted with the Allied approach, which emphasized numerical superiority, tactical flexibility, and combined arms operations. The Tiger was, as a symbol of German engineering prowess, a psychological weapon as much as a physical one, designed to instill fear and demonstrate technological superiority. Its very existence forced a reevaluation of Allied tank design and anti-tank doctrine, prompting urgent calls for heavier guns and thicker armor on future tanks. Normandy, July 1944. The initial engagements had been brutal, a series of sharp, localized shocks. Now, as the front lines stabilized into something resembling a continuous siege, the true scale of the German armored threat began to register in the Allied command centers. Damage reports, initially seen as isolated incidents, coalesced into a chilling pattern. The M4 Sherman, the backbone of American armored divisions, was proving woefully inadequate against the heavier German tanks. The Sherman's 75mm M3 gun, a capable weapon against most infantry and light vehicles, struggled to penetrate the frontal armor of a Panther at anything beyond point-blank range, and against a Tiger I, its effectiveness was virtually nil from the front. Analysis of recovered German armor plates, often riddled with glancing impacts or shallow craters from Sherman rounds, confirmed the grim reality. The Tiger's 100mm frontal hull and 100mm turret front, angled effectively, presented an almost impenetrable barrier to the American tank's primary armament. Conversely, the German 8.8cm WK-36 L56 gun, mounted on the Tiger, possessed a muzzle velocity and projectile mass that made short work of the Sherman's relatively thin armor. Unit diaries frequently recorded instances of Shermans being penetrated frontally from the side, and even through the rear engine deck at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. The M4's 51mm frontal hull and 76mm turret front, designed to withstand earlier anti-tank threats, offered little protection against the high-velocity German rounds. Production logs from Detroit showed a steady output of over 1,500 Shermans per month, a quantitative advantage that Allied strategists hoped would overwhelm the numerically inferior German forces. However, this statistical superiority was being eroded by the qualitative disparity on the battlefield. A single Tiger, skillfully positioned, could account for multiple Shermans before being neutralized, often by flanking maneuvers or overwhelming artillery support rather than direct tank-on-tank engagements. The ideological implication of this imbalance was profound. American doctrine had emphasized mobility, reliability, and ease of production, assuming that quantity would compensate for individual unit superiority. The encounters in Normandy forced a reevaluation, revealing that a numerically dominant force could still suffer disproportionate losses when faced with technologically superior individual units. The psychological toll on tank crews, knowing their primary weapon was outmatched, was immeasurable. The urgent calls for upgunned Shermans, particularly those equipped with the 76mm M1 gun, grew louder from the field. Even with this upgrade, the fundamental armor disparity remained, a stark testament to the divergent design philosophies that had shaped the opposing forces. The landscape of armored warfare had irrevocably shifted. The news of the Tiger's effectiveness, filtering back through intelligence reports and combat after-action reviews, solidified a grim reality for Allied strategists. The existing tank doctrine and production lines were insufficient. The M4 Sherman, a backbone of American armored divisions, possessed a 75mm M3 main gun, a weapon designed for infantry support and engaging light armored vehicles, not the heavily sloped and thick armor of the Tiger. Production logs indicated that by late 1943, over 20,000 Shermans had rolled off assembly lines across a dozen facilities, a testament to American industrial might, but their quantitative advantage was being nullified by the qualitative superiority of a single German design. Engineers at Aberdeen Proving Ground and Detroit Arsenal began an urgent reevaluation of tank armament and armor. The immediate solution involved upgunning the Sherman, a process that was not straightforward. The Sherman's turret ring diameter, designed for the 75mm gun, was too small to readily accommodate larger, more powerful cannons without extensive modification. The British, facing similar challenges, had already begun experimenting with mounting their potent 17-pounder anti-tank gun in a modified Sherman turret, leading to the Sherman Firefly, a stopgap measure that would eventually prove vital. American efforts focused on developing a domestic high-velocity gun. The 76mm M1 gun, with its higher muzzle velocity and improved armor-piercing capabilities, was a direct response to the threat posed by heavier German armor. Integrating this new weapon required a redesigned turret, which in turn necessitated changes to the Sherman's hull to maintain balance and structural integrity. This iterative process of design, testing, and retooling production lines consumed critical months, during which American tankers continued to face the Tiger with their outmatched 75mm guns. Beyond upgunning, there was a push to develop entirely new tank designs. The T-20 medium tank series, initiated in 1942, aimed for a more heavily armored and better armed successor to the Sherman. However, design complexities, competing priorities, and the sheer scale of retooling required for mass production meant that these advanced designs would not reach the battlefield in significant numbers until much later in the war. The industrial infrastructure, geared for rapid production of the Sherman, could not simply pivot overnight to a completely new platform without incurring massive delays. The logistical challenge extended to ammunition production. The new 76mm guns required different types of shells, and the manufacturing facilities for these specialized rounds had to be scaled up. This involved sourcing new materials, reconfiguring machinery, and training a workforce for precision manufacturing, all while maintaining the immense output of existing 75mm ammunition for the vast fleet of Shermans already in service. The war economy, while robust, faced finite resources and competing demands from all branches of the military. The strategic implication of the Tiger's presence was a forced shift in Allied tank doctrine. No longer could American tanks rely solely on numerical superiority and maneuver. Tank commanders were now explicitly briefed on the Tiger's capabilities and weaknesses, with instructions to engage only from flanks or rear, or to call for artillery and air support. This adaptation required not just new hardware, but also a fundamental change in tactics and training, a re-education of an entire armored force under the pressure of combat. The development of the M26 Pershing heavy tank, with its powerful 90mm gun and thicker armor, represented the ultimate American answer to the Tiger and Panther. Its design incorporated lessons learned from direct encounters with German heavy tanks, prioritizing firepower and protection over the Sherman's emphasis on speed and ease of production. However, the first production models of the P. Rushing would not see combat until early 1945, a full year and a half after the initial encounters with the Tiger. A stark illustration of the immense lead time required for industrial reorientation. The reports from Tunisia and later from Sicily, detailing the Tiger's devastating capabilities, began to coalesce into a grim consensus within Allied command structures. Initial skepticism, often fueled by an institutional reluctance to acknowledge superior enemy materiel, gave way to an urgent reevaluation of existing doctrine and equipment. The M4 Sherman, designed for a balance of mobility, firepower, and protection against the PZ KPFW-3 and 4, was demonstrably outmatched by the Panther and critically vulnerable to the Tiger. Damage assessments from engagements in North Africa and Italy consistently highlighted the inadequacy of the Sherman's 75mm M3 gun against the Tiger's frontal armor. Penetration data, derived from captured German armor and Allied firing trials, showed that the M3 gun, firing M61 armor-piercing capped projectiles, could only reliably penetrate the Tiger Eye's glacis plate at ranges under 100 meters, and even then, only at optimal angles. The Tiger's 88mm KWK 36 L56 gun, by contrast, could defeat the Sherman's frontal armor at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters with ease. This stark disparity in combat effectiveness necessitated immediate and fundamental changes. The development of more powerful anti-tank guns became a top priority. The British, already fielding the 17-pounder, began integrating it into their Sherman Firefly conversions, a stopgap measure that significantly increased the Sherman's lethality. American efforts accelerated the development of the 76mm M1 gun, which, while an improvement, still struggled against the Tiger's heaviest armor, particularly the mantlet and hull front. Beyond gun development, armor protection also received renewed scrutiny. While the Sherman's inherent design limited the extent of additional armor that could be practically added without severely impacting mobility and mechanical reliability, engineers explored applique armor kits and other field modifications. The concept of up-armoring became standard practice, often involving welding additional steel plates to critical areas or even the placement of sandbags, though the latter's effectiveness was often debated and its weight added stress to the suspension. Tactical doctrine also underwent a significant overhaul. The previous emphasis on individual tank engagements shifted towards combined arms approaches, where infantry, artillery, and air support were meticulously coordinated to neutralize enemy heavy tanks. The principle of flanking became paramount, with Sherman crews trained to avoid head-on confrontations and instead maneuver to exploit the Tiger's weaker side and rear armor. Tank destroyer battalions, equipped with more powerful guns like the 76mm M1A1 or later the 90mm N3, were increasingly deployed in a direct fire support role, tasked specifically with engaging and destroying enemy heavy armor. The operational impact of the Tiger was also reflected in production priorities. While the sheer volume of Sherman production continued unabated, reaching over 49,000 units by the war's end, a significant portion of these later models incorporated the improved 76mm gun. Furthermore, the push for heavier American tanks, such as the M26 Pershing, gained considerable momentum, directly influenced by the need to field a tank capable of meeting the Tiger and Panther on more equal terms. The first production M26 Pershing tanks, armed with the 90mm M3 gun, would not see combat until February 1945, a full 2 years after the initial encounters with the Tiger.